This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about a big bureaucrat who's lately been bashing Bitcoin. This, of course, is Agustin Carstens, who's the head of the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, which is really the central bank for all of the other central banks. He has said recently that crypto has lost the battle against fiat currency, and the problem is that technology doesn't make for trusted money. So I want to talk a little bit about what he might mean by trusted money. The good news for Agustin, of course, is that Bitcoiners do not trust. We don't have to trust anyone with our money. We verify instead. We run full nodes. We verify all the transactions and all the history going back to 2009 and making sure there are no double spends or anything like that. Now, why might it be a good idea not to trust people like Agustin? Well, unfortunately, governments have a very long history of being both evil and incompetent. They can also do a lot of good, but unfortunately, history has taught us that most of the time, governments get very big and bloated, and they start to attack their own citizens. And so when Agustin says, just trust us, I have a problem with this, and I have a problem with his trusted money, because I've lived long enough to hear that we should just trust them, that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, that we should just trust them, that we'd be able to keep our health care plan. Just trust us, inflation is transitory. And look, inflation actually has a silver lining because people get higher salaries. Just trust us when we always report inflation below the actual inflation rate. And we constantly keep changing the CPI basket and we make various adjustments so inflation doesn't appear as high as it is. The other thing that Agustin Carstens said is that only the legal historical infrastructure behind central banks can give great credibility. Again, this is the big guy, the big head of the big central bank that all the other central banks interact with. And he believes that only central banks can give money credibility. So I would ask him, how well have central banks managed our money over the past 100 years? Unfortunately, not very well at all, as we're going to see. If you're enjoying this video so far and you'd like to help support the channel, I just ask you to hit the like button and most importantly, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel. So how well have central banks managed our money over the past 100 years? The US dollar has been managed and has survived much better than most fiat currencies simply by being the global reserve currency. But if we take a look at this, it's been straight down in terms of the US dollar's purchasing power under central bankers since the founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913. Back then, $1 would buy you 30 Hershey's chocolate bars. When Bretton Woods went through in 1944, a dollar would buy you 20 bottles of Coca-Cola. By the end of the Korean War, it bought you 10 bags of pretzels. In the early 70s, when we left the gold standard, $1 would buy you 17 oranges. And as of 2020, $1, you'd be lucky to buy one McDonald's coffee. I don't know how much a McDonald's coffee costs now if they've kept the price at $1 and eaten the difference. This is one reason that Satoshi in the Genesis block embedded this headline. You could say it was one of the first inscriptions. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. And I think the great thing about this article from the Times is you can see up here, eat out from £5, more than 900 great restaurants, including 4 Gordon Ramsay favorites from $15. Unlikely you can still eat at any Gordon Ramsay restaurant anywhere and pay, only 15 pounds. Remember, you need Bitcoin, though, not crypto, if you don't want to have to trust someone. If you don't want to have to trust the central bankers like Agustin Carstens and Jerome Powell, you should avoid fiat currency because it's a very bad thing to hold over long periods of time, and these people are not trustworthy. But the problem is, if you venture into crypto, if you make the wrong move, you're going to end up trusting someone else. So for example, Terra Luna, just trust Do Kwon's plan for you, and that worked out very badly for Terra people as we examined at the time. Celsius, just trust Alex Mashinsky's plan for you. That didn't work out very well either. And then we have 2 scams that will eventually implode as well. Cardano, trust Charles Hoskinson's plan for you. This coin is obviously down a huge amount from the highs, and so people have already gotten pretty wrecked. Ethereum, trust Vitalik Buterin's plan for you. And the nice thing about Bitcoin is you don't need to trust anyone. There's no founder, there's no leader. There is a founder, but Satoshi disappeared from the project many, many years ago and exerts no influence whatsoever over the project. He's never moved or sold his coins, and he doesn't have the bully pulpit in the same way that Hoskinson and Buterin do in Cardano and Ethereum. Here's an example. Cardano founder Charles Hoskinson lays out the plans for 2022. Doesn't sound very decentralized to me in terms of how the currency functions. Ethereum, Vitalik has everything all planned for you. After the merge, we get the surge, the verge, the purge, and the splurge. And you can't even make this up, how weird it is. Oasis recently, last week, exploited its own wallet software to seize crypto at the order of the High Court of England and Wales. So this shows how decentralized DeFi really is. When push comes to shove, they can use their special multisig, go in there and take your money. This is so-called DeFi. So I would say to Agustin Carstens, I think it's a little bit early to declare victory. There are all these problems with a lot of the cryptocurrencies, as we've seen, like Cardano and Ethereum, which are garbage, which are proof of stake, which are trending towards zero against Bitcoin, and will continue to do that. But I would say that Agustin Carstens is also on the wrong side of history with fiat currency, which is a fairly recent experiment, really only been around since 1971, and it's been a very, very bad experiment. And a lot of people have suffered as a result of fiat, especially middle class and working class who don't know as well how to hedge against inflation and currency devaluation as those with more assets. So I would say to Agustin, it's a little bit early to declare victory when inflation is out of control, especially in Europe, when any attempt to control inflation tanks the stock and housing markets and obliterates tax revenues. This is a problem in Europe and a problem in the US, and really a problem in any country that has a high debt to GDP ratio as the US does now. Here's another problem. Russia no longer wants your dirty fiat for oil. So I would ask Agustin, how well is that system actually working for you, and why should we trust you? When we see the history of fiat and we see how these various currencies trend to zero in terms of their purchasing power, I would say, though, that it's working out pretty well for Agustin, if not for the rest of the world. He seems to be prospering. Meanwhile, Europe is still stuck in an energy crisis. They've spent 800 billion euros basically giving free money to people so they can pay their energy bills. And yet inflation, as of last September, was still hitting record highs above 9%. And the real problem with inflation, and the thing that Agustin Carstens should keep in mind, is that it really has an uneven impact. As we said, it hurts the working class and the middle class much, much more. And so one of the great ironies is these central bankers who pretend to be on the side of social justice, their policies and the way they move fiat basically contributes really highly to social inequalities. Here's Agustin Carstens with his bud, Christine Lagarde, who was, of course, indicted a few years ago over a case of bribery. So these are not good people. What gives me hope, though, is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the answer. Bitcoin is why we don't have to trust big bureaucrats like Agustin Carstens. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.